My name is Heide. I'm a faculty member at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak to you today about doing developmental reviews. Let me approach this topic in the following way. First of all, let me start by establishing some baseline assumptions. These are basically the guidelines that I approach a new manuscript with. Secondly, I would like to talk about some guidelines for doing the actual review itself, the types of things that I keep in mind or try to keep in mind while I'm doing the review. And I would like to close by talking about some outcomes of the review process. So starting with what I call baseline assumptions, and there are 4 of them that I would like to share with you. The first baseline assumption is that this is not my manuscript. This manuscript belongs to somebody else, and I try very hard to keep that in mind and to not micromanage the process. I want to leave the authors with some ownership of the process. That being said, it's not my manuscript, but I may be able to help. I know from my own experience that authors are not always entirely objective about their work, and I'm as guilty of that as anyone. So as a reviewer who don't really have a stake in the paper, I may be able to help guide the paper towards publication. And I may even be able to help perhaps shape the paper in such a way that its impact and readability is ultimately enhanced. My third baseline assumption is that the authors have worked hard on the paper. This is almost always the case, and because authors have worked hard, I try very hard to respect their work and keep that in mind when I do my review. My last baseline assumption is that submission to the Academy of Management Review can be scary. It's especially scary for first-time authors who are submitting to AMR for the first time. And submission may also be scary because writing a theory paper is inherently tricky. You don't have data and empirics to fall back on. You're judged entirely on your ideas, and the thought of doing that may be a bit intimidating. So I try to keep that part in mind as a baseline assumption as well. Let me talk about some guidelines for doing the review itself, things that I try to keep in mind as I'm working on a manuscript. First of all, if something in the manuscript has been done well, please say so. If you see a clever theoretical linkage, an interesting argument, if you spot some very interesting and novel implications, there's absolutely nothing wrong with pointing that out. Secondly, try to not leave the authors guessing about what you have in mind and what you are trying to say. I believe there's a certain amount of information asymmetry that characterizes a review process, and anything you can do as a reviewer to be clear about your intentions and your requests, I think is a good thing and very helpful. My third guideline for doing the review is to avoid micromanaging the process. There's another type of information asymmetry that comes into play here, in that it is not difficult for a reviewer to generate what I call nuisance comments. Try to refrain from doing that and try to focus on the things that are truly important. Relatedly, my fourth guideline is to think through the implications of what you are requesting. Try to not send the authors on a wild goose chase. It is easy for a reviewer to make a simple comment, a seemingly simple comment, that may turn out to be quite time-consuming. So if you make a request, try to think ahead to what this might mean for the authors and for the task that they have to complete. My fifth guideline is to don't just list problems, try to suggest solutions to the problems. It is not difficult to generate a laundry list of issues and problems. It is more difficult to come up with solutions. I think, however, as a reviewer, that if you identify a problem, you should also try to do your best to at least suggest how the problem can be resolved or how it can be approached by the authors. My last guideline for the review process is to try to give the authors a sense of priority, to try to rank order the things that really have to be done. If a manuscript passes certain preliminary screens, screens for novelty, screens for being interesting, screens for being important, many other things in the review process sometimes do come down to taste, or at the very least, not everything is equally important. Anything you can do as a reviewer to prioritize and tell the authors the things that in your mind absolutely have to be done versus the things that may be less important is very, very helpful. Let me close by talking about some outcomes of the review process. First of all, when the review process works well, it becomes, I believe, a partnership between the authors and the review team. There's also a bit of an endogeneity going on here in the sense that if a partnership is indeed established, the review process works that much better. Finally, it's a thrill for me as a reviewer to see a paper in print, to see something come out that I may have played a small role in helping shape. I very much appreciate your listening to my comments. I hope some of the things that I said today turn out to be helpful to you, and I wish you all the best with your reviewing. Thank you very much.